And now, Tina Blythe of the Democratic Knowledge Project will lead a discussion on liberty and learning in practice with Veronica Pitts of Selma City Schools, Peter Brown of Oklahoma City Public Schools, Melissa Greene of Silver Lake Regional School District, and Ellie Sammons of Northeast High School and the School District of Philadelphia.
Thank you so much, everyone. Doing a quick sound check. Thumbs up in the back of the room if the sound is okay. Excellent, great. Thank you all. My name is Tina Blythe. I am the Director of Professional Learning for the Democratic Knowledge Project, which is based at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. There, I lead something called the Civic Learning Institute, which supports EAD-aligned, Educating for American Democracy aligned professional learning for educators. And we are also now the interim operational home for Educating for American Democracy. It's a delight to be here with you all this morning, and it's a special delight because we are about to amplify the voices of educators. One of the beautiful things about this gathering are the diversity of role perspectives that we're bringing to this conversation. So we've already heard from the chief education officers from several states. We've heard from philanthropists and funders. And now we're going to hear from practitioners, people in classrooms, schools, and districts. You know, there's no shortage of conversation about how challenging it is right now to be in classrooms. Actually, I'm just going to say full stop there. There is no shortage of challenges right now if you are an educator in the United States, period, right? And there's a special kind of challenge if you are an educator invested in civics and history learning, right? There's also, I think, a special kind of joy in that work. And our goal here this morning is to hear both about the challenges, which I am sure that many of you in this room will recognize as you hear about them, but also how those challenges were met, and the incredible joy and satisfaction that comes from knowing that we can take positive steps to support civic learning for young people and for ourselves and our colleagues. So let me invite our panelists to introduce themselves, and then I'll say just another word about what we've asked them to do, and then we'll hear some stories. So let's start here. Veronica, would you like to start?
Good morning. My name is Veronica Pitts. I teach 12th grade government and economics in the historic Selma, Alabama.
Good morning. My name is Melissa Greene, and I am the Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator for grades 7 through 12 at the Silver Lake Regional School District in Massachusetts, which serves the towns of Kingston, Halifax, and Plimpton.
Good morning. I'm Peter Brown. I am the grades 5 through 12 Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator for Oklahoma City Public Schools.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ellie Sammons. I want to thank you for this opportunity and for putting educator voices at the forefront. I'm a proud classroom teacher of 20 years, most of that in Philadelphia and most of that teaching 12th grade civics.
Great, thank you all. And thank you all again so much for being here. The charge we gave to the panelists was not a simple one. It was, of the thousands of challenges you face in supporting civic and history learning, pick one to talk about. Of the hundreds of things you do to deal with that challenge, pick one thing to share with us, and do it all in 7 minutes or less. So you can imagine what a tall order this was. And I know that as you hear these stories, you will listen for the learning, you will listen with love in your hearts for educators who have been given this impossible task of putting the complexity of teaching and around civics and learning in such a compressed time frame here. So what we're going to do is hear one story from each of the panelists, and then we'll turn to the Slido deck and take some questions from the audience as we go. So with that, Ellie, we're going to invite you to start, and then we're going to move down the line from there.
Okay. Well, welcome to Philadelphia. This is my home, and I'm very fortunate to work in a city with such rich history, although I am from Massachusetts, born and raised, so I will not say this is the birthplace of America. But I am very lucky. I get to take my students on field trips to the Old City neighborhood where the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were written, and that's quite an honor. However, I find that so many of my seniors still lack the strong foundational knowledge of history and government. And while I do teach civics, which is mostly current events oriented, I always start with the foundations of this country's history and documents. And when I do that, I get physical responses from my students of eye rolling in the back of their head and groans and just this sense of boredom and real disconnect when I even mention, the H word, I call it history. And so my passion and my challenge has always been to help them understand the importance of this history and these documents, to help them understand the relevance and the connection that they still have today. And I think I found a way to do that, a hack. Which was to look at this topic through the lens of values. And I've actually come to realize that that may be the biggest impact that this time period and these documents have, because while they provide the structure and the rules for our government, it's the values embedded in the documents that I think form the foundation of that structure. So I created a project, an assignment, where students had to analyze and explore the question of whether or not the current actions of our government were aligning with the values in the founding documents. And they had to do that through the creation of a crime board, an evidence board, so there was a little arts and crafts aspect to it. So first, we started out with this concept of values, having them look at their own personal values and identifying those and examining their historical events that shaped their values, where they got them. And then we moved on to examining our classroom values. So this served as a community builder as well. And we talked about the shared values of our classroom. And then we asked, what happens if a student doesn't adhere to those values and does not align with those values? So they could really personalize that concept. And then we moved to the founding documents. For example, we looked at the preamble to the Constitution, where it says that the purpose of government is to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, among others. And we looked at some of the context of those words, the chaos of the post-revolutionary period, infighting within the states, just the general sense of fear and a fear of violence. And my students boiled that concept down to safety, that it is the role of the government and of society generally to keep us safe. So then I asked my students what was a topic that they were interested in, and they chose immigration, which is obviously a big issue right now. And I was able to hone in on the specific topic of whether or not ICE agents should be allowed to wear masks. This was a big debate at the time. And I found a great article that presented both sides. On the one hand, you had former Homeland Secretary, Kristi Noem, arguing that ICE agents needed to wear masks in order to feel safe. That in the article, she stated that they were being labeled as Gestapo and Nazis, and that they felt that they could be targeted, and so they needed masks to protect their safety. In that same article, we had quotes from Governor Gavin Newsom, who was saying that people felt unsafe because the ICE agents were wearing masks, that it was against their value of safety when ICE agents were going into their communities and they couldn't identify them. So it was a really great example. It showed, first of all, that our leaders today use the words, and the values of the founding documents to justify their actions and their arguments, and that both sides of the argument use that same value. So it's not a black and white concept. And so the students had to discuss and debate and really decide what is the truth, what is their truth. And it was just a really great project, and then ultimately they had to put their conclusions on the board. When I asked them to reflect on this, I was blown away. I was amazed by what they said. At first I was thinking, oh God, they're just saying what I want them to say because it was perfect. But then I got a few that said I didn't learn anything from this assignment. So that was good. I knew that they felt they could be honest and open with me. But so many of them, again and again, I just kept reading. Now I understand the importance of these documents. I understand how they impact our lives. And I'll just conclude with one the words of a student himself. He said, "I used to think history or politics was boring because I didn't think they really had a major impact on my life. I didn't really see how my life would have been different if these historic events did not happen." I swear I did not pay him to write this. "Now I think knowing this history is important because these old documents have impacted and are still impacting decisions today. Knowing the history and the values embedded in these documents will give you a better understanding of why things are happening and when things are going against the Constitution, even when the people going against it are the higher-ups." So it was a really wonderful lesson for me and for them, and it helped build a very strong foundation as we explored the Constitution throughout the year.
Wow, Ellie, thank you so much.
Sure.
So from Ellie, this beautiful story of bringing to life documents that at first blush seem to have no relevance at all from a student perspective, and yet the values are so important and serve as that bridge to anchoring those to our lived lives today. Thank you for that. So from Ellie's classroom, we are going to move to a district perspective and hear, Peter, from you about your experiences in Oklahoma City.
Okay. Well, thank you for this opportunity. When there was a time to think about what is one thing, I was like, oh my goodness, how many hours do I have? We've been through the ringer over the years. So I'm going to start with a word that gives teachers, they might twitch a little bit, COVID. We were coming out of COVID and dealing with, all of a sudden, now we have a learning management system where we didn't have one before. So teachers are learning this new learning management system. Some of them didn't even check their emails, and now they're having to put all their classes online. As well, we had some legislation that was not necessarily civic learning friendly, the most onerous being House Bill 1775, which said if a teacher taught something that made a student feel uncomfortable, they could lose their license or be held personally responsible. So teachers were afraid. They didn't know how do we teach this. As well, we had a massive influx of emergency certified teachers who had no collegiate training in education. So the question was, how do we build civic learning spaces with the perfect storm coming at us? And I can't say we did it perfectly, but I can give you some of the things that we went through and some of the successes. So it came to me one day, I was talking with one of my department chairs, Jeff Woolsey, and we were talking on the phone, and he was venting about everything he's going through with classes, and he said, Peter, if I had the what, I could focus on the how. And we have a district curriculum, but it was scattered, and it was in a bunch of different places. And at that moment, I realized that the support needed wasn't symbolic. He didn't need me to go into Coach Brown's halftime speech, hey, we're going to rally. I was pretty good at that when I coached. But he needed structural support, and that's what my teachers were asking for. So from that, I began to build out some pieces and to make some shifts. The first shift we made was towards radical clarity. So we made sure all of our materials, all of our district resources were aligned, like we double-checked they're aligned. So now teachers could have confidence knowing if they teach a district resource, it's going to be protected. As well, we put all of the district resources into the learning management system where they didn't have to go look at links, they didn't have to go find it in Google Drives. It was all there in the platform they used. So we wanted to simplify the process for teachers. And then as well, we added guidance on how do you stay nonpartisan when having the civic dialogue, when we're having these conversations. Where is the moment where it's danger, Will Robinson, and okay, we're turning. We provided guidance so they knew that they had support. So that was the first thing, the radical clarity. And then we really began to leverage relationships as a structural component. My dad was a pastor for 39 years, and the way he cared for his flock is the way I try to care for my teachers. And anytime there's a phone call, email, text, whatever, responding very quickly, being responsive to it, knowing that if something comes up, I'm there. Being in the schools was important. Being in classrooms, I tried to be in classrooms so much that it wasn't a big deal if Peter comes and sits in the class. The kids are like, oh yeah, he's here again. So building that relationship and knowing that they had someone who had their back, that was a structural component for the teachers to provide support. And the third thing that we did is build leadership capacity. My department chair meetings in the past had been a lot of, here's information that the district wants you to have, right? And those wonderful meetings where we get together, we can talk, but then it could have been an email, right? So we began practicing conversations with struggling teachers. And teachers love role-playing, being the teacher who is having a hard time making each other work for it. We did that. We practiced. As well, we leveraged outside groups. So for example, we've partnered with Generation Citizen for years for our civics. We partnered with iCivics for at least the last 3 years. So it has been helpful in adding capacity there. And another one of my department chairs, Ron Parker, told me, he goes, Peter, you're always stretching us. You're moving our cheese, but you're stretching us towards something that matters. And that stuck with me because growth isn't easy. It's not comfortable. But he knew as he's growing, he's got me to support him. And that's what I tried to do. That's what we tried to build within our district. And a fine example of that, Nancy Brewer is here. She's one of my department chairs, and she's a Civic Learning Fellow. And so, she has done so much for civic education in Oklahoma, and I'm proud to say that she's here. So the last thing that I did leverage for me, because I needed to be fed as well, was my state level consortium, the Oklahoma Social Studies Leaders Association. I leaned into them. We go through the same, we're going through the same issues. Now, granted, it looks different in inner city, urban Oklahoma City versus the suburbs, but we're going through the same issues with the standards. We're going through teacher apathy, student apathy. So we really were able to lean on each other and provide that support for each other. And so by providing these structures for teachers, we came out of COVID through this hard time with a sustainable system where we had all of our curriculum in a learning management system. We had increased teacher leadership capacity, and we had teachers that were confident in teaching issues that were challenging. And we were able to provide a safe learning space where students could practice civic dialogue with curiosity and courage because we provided teachers and created that culture of support, that culture of strength and collaboration.
Thank you so much, Peter. I really hear you speaking to the value of relationship there and creating spaces where teachers and department chairs could be learners as well, right? Schools can't be places where students do the learning they need to do if they aren't also places where we as educators can do the learning that we need to do. So I really appreciate those themes in your story. Let's hear another district level story coming from you, Melissa, about your work in Silver Lake.
Thank you, Tina. So yesterday, those of you who were here, we heard a lot about the macro level of the importance of community partnership. And so today I'm going to talk to you a bit about what that looks like in my district on the micro level. To give you a little bit of context for the state of Massachusetts, in 2018, our frameworks were redesigned to include an emphasis on civics at all grade levels, including a full year course in 8th grade on civics. In addition, we do have a general law in Massachusetts which requires all public schools to teach American history and civics, and also that all middle and high school students partake in a student-led civics project. So clearly at the state level in Massachusetts, there's a lot of support and legislation for civics education. But for those of us that are at the district and school level, there is a particular element to that we really need to think about, and that is how do we gain the support and understanding of our local community members, the majority of whom never have actually had civic education themselves. In my role as a curriculum coordinator, part of what I do is support the community and work as a liaison to them. And what I've realized is that the majority of families and community members at large really don't have a full understanding of what students are learning about when it comes to civics, or even more significantly, why it's important. Concerns I've directly fielded have centered on real concerns and worry over political polarization, which I know many of you are probably really familiar with those concerns as well. There's also fears that students might be taught what to think instead of how to develop those critical thinking skills. Massachusetts, it's no surprise, is a very blue state, right, on the national level, but it also might surprise you to know that we do have a great deal of ideological diversity. A lot of our towns are really split right down the middle. In fact, the 3 towns that I serve all voted red in the last national election. So as educators, how do we build trust and transparency within the community for civics when there seems to be a lack of understanding amongst the general public about what it even is? And so I'm going to share with you today 2 things that I've worked with my teachers to do that we have found some great success with. And they're simple at their core, but they are things that really have been great levers for us. Now, the first thing that we tried to prioritize when we switched into teaching civics, particularly in 8th grade, was really clear, consistent, and transparent communication with families, right? So we want to make sure that families know what to expect and what they might hear their students coming home to talk about. We use a variety of methods to do that, but I won't go into all of those at the moment, but I'm going to share a recent example. So students in our 8th grade civics class finished recently a unit on the powers of government. And we are partners with the Democratic Knowledge Project. And through that, they were evaluating the following question: does the presidency have too much power? Right? And that's a big question, right, for some 8th graders to grapple with. And so what we realize is that it's really important for our families to know that students are learning about the role as it applies to all presidents, not the particular president in power at the time. And that this is not partisan education, it is civic education. And to that end, one of the things that's been really helpful for my teachers to do is to provide families with talking points that they can actually use at home to engage in conversation. Our families need our support in how to talk to students because, as I said, right, it's been 70 years of moving away from civic education. These families have not had that opportunity themselves as students. And I think I can say for everyone here, we weren't even trained that way as social studies educators. So my teachers provide families with prompts that they can use with their kids at home with the help of the amazing resources that the DKP offers through our partnership. And this has really made a big difference. It eased people's fears around the potential for things to be partisan, right, by empowering them with information and a way to be part of the conversation when they might otherwise really feel uncomfortable with that. My other recommendation, and something that has really worked well for us, is to try to build really strategic and strong relationships within our community for our students. It's really been my experience that when asked, people are eager to be a part of what is going on in the schools. And so we are constantly asking people to come in and be a part of what we're doing to speak to our students, whether that be our County Bar Association or our Massachusetts Tri child judges or our local representative or the police department, whatever it is that can add additional context for students. But the most powerful way that we have seen students really make these strong connections within the community is when they do their student-led projects. And more importantly, when they actually get to then showcase that hard work to the community. So in Massachusetts, the project has students take on an issue in the community of importance to them. And through our curriculum throughout the whole year, we make sure that that's really deeply rooted in their value system, similar to what Ellie was talking about. And they're able to deeply develop that throughout the school year because of the DKP curriculum that we use. So on showcase days, in which last year we had 4, so 3 during the day, 1 in the evening, where we invite anyone and everyone from our 3 communities to actually come into the school and to engage with students about their projects. Students are going to present in small groups or one-on-one using trifold boards, really not all that dissimilar to the poster projects that we saw here, except these are 13 and 14-year-olds talking with people about civics. And this really helps to extend their audience, right? And it creates awareness within the community that, in fact, what we are doing is nonpartisan and that it's about long-term, sustained efforts towards positive societal change that we really need to keep our democracy healthy and resilient. As an example, recently a small group of middle school students were really focused on stress reduction, right? They looked at their peers, they are children of COVID, and they see a lot of stress. And so they started to do some research and look into the concept of therapy dogs. And when they first started out on their project, their biggest hurdle was their own building principal. And so they surveyed their peers. They talked to local school leaders about policy. They reached out to an organization that actually has therapy dogs, as well as the local police department that has a comfort dog. And through their work, we now regularly have therapy dogs in that middle school. And I think that's really important for the community to see that students are really passionate and persistent when given the opportunity to find something that they deeply care about. And a lot of these students, particularly our 8th graders, don't even get to reap the benefits of what they've done, right? That group of middle school students that worked on the therapy dogs, they don't even go to school there anymore, right? They're on to high school, but they've left behind this legacy and this building of community that really, I think, emulates what we want civics to be about. And so I think that through these connections with community, we're really trying to empower both our students, but our families and our stakeholders to see that we need support at all levels for civic education and democratic participation to really thrive.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you.
I think you all can start to hear some of the themes that are developing here, right, around the importance of relationship, the importance of listening and bringing voices to the front. And we're going to return for our last story to Veronica and back to the classroom, a classroom story that you'll share with us.
I'm sorry I have to do this. Hey, y'all, how y'all doing? All right, so again, my name is Veronica. I teach government and economics in Selma, Alabama. Selma is located in Alabama's Black Belt. It stretches across central Alabama. It's known for its rich soil, its various parts of the civil rights movement, and it has the highest concentration of African Americans in the state. This region also is the poorest area of the state, which my county being ranked number 4. However, working at a Title I school may have its challenges, but I work in a wonderful school district. I have a lot of support. I have a colleague that came all the way up here with me because he knew I would be nervous. And so that just speaks to the sense of community that my district does have. And so one of the things that we have to do in my state is give all seniors, once they've completed government, the Alabama Civics exam. And so after the first year of doing the Alabama Civics exam, I did what any other educator would do. I would ask for feedback. How did you like my class? What should I do better? What will make this experience better for the next generation? And all of them said the same thing. They loved me, but didn't like the work. They loved me, but it was too much testing. And then I had to process that. I said, you know what? They do have to take finals in all their classes. Half of them are dual enrollment students. Again, they have the civics exam work keys, so I couldn't change what the state requires, but I could change with how I do my own instructional practices. So I did get permission from the district and my principal at the time to do a civic project. It is their senior project. All students must complete it so that they do not have to take an exam with their government or their economics class. And so what I do is I elect one class officer in each one of the classes, and halfway through the government course, because government and economics are half-credit classes, so halfway through government, they'll tell me what their civic project will be. And so this particular year, they decided they wanted to do a social media campaign and create infographics that will talk about the Selma voting rights movement and its impact on the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And they would just share tips and encourage people to vote because we all know that there is some voter apathy within the African American community, especially with Black men. And so this was their decision. I didn't want to have any ownership in them because, again, this is the legacy that they were leaving. They chose to use X because they did not want to blend academics with personal. And apparently X is popping nowadays, I don't know, but apparently it is, and they wanted to kind of like cleanse the X timeline. So I took this to my administrator, and they said, oh, this is cute, okay, go ahead. So I'm like, all right, girl, all right. So we rocking and we rolling, and y'all, they know stuff on Canva that I have no idea. So we're moving, and they're they like what they're doing. They were working on the project more than my work, but that's another story for another day. And so the project always starts in economics, which is the second and fourth 9-week course. And halfway through the project, another administrator comes to me and says, hey, you need to stop because a community partner is furious that you are using X as the platform due to its affiliation with the owner. And that we are in a blue town in a red state, and I should know better. And so I was furious. I said a lot of bad words, I said enough bad words to last me from Selma to Montgomery to come back. And so I just couldn't believe it because I had a relationship with the community partner. And I was thinking, well, maybe because they know I'm sensitive, I'm a crier. So maybe they just didn't want to tell me to hurt my feelings. But then I'm going to be completely transparent. I wasn't sure if it was the community partner. Was it my administrator? Because I am the Student Government Association sponsor and the president of the local education association. So whenever there is tension in the building, we'll put it like this. Me and administration talked all year long from August to May. So I felt like this was not an attack on the students, but an attack on me. And so again, I cried and I cussed and I cried and I cussed. And so I was talking to one of my friends and I said, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Well, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna resign at the end of the school year. I got too much going on. Like, I just have to get to the beginning of May. And so my friend said, what would John Lewis do? Because, y'all, I'm embarrassed to say this, I have an unhealthy obsession with John Lewis. And so, like, when he passed away, like, I literally fell out. So I was just like, oh, okay, you're right. And so I prayed on it after I finished cussing and fussing. And I prayed on it, and I woke up the next day, and I said, you know what? I pride myself on being a student-centered educator who believes that students are the future, and I always allow them to have a part in the decision-making process in my classroom. So I told the students, hey, we gotta shift gears. There's an issue with using X. Who little did I know, I had other little John Lewises in my classroom, and they were like, oh no ma'am, we're not doing this again. We've been working on this for 3 to 4 weeks. Absolutely not. My senior senator went on my smartboard and said, where's the district policy? Like, where's the website? Oh no, we didn't break any rules. We're using our school accounts. Like, we did not do anything wrong. We're not starting this project over. And so, of course, on the inside, I'm like, oh, thank you, Jesus. But of course, I couldn't let that show because I wanted them to arrive at this decision on their own. And so she said, I'm gonna get a meeting with the principal. And in my mind, I'm thinking, Okay, but I'm not gonna tell y'all how the meeting goes, but just know that they finished their project. And so I thought that was just the end of this particular school year, and then time goes by, and this past September, my life changed, and the Bill of Rights Institute came to my school and named me their National Civics Teacher of the Year. And so, I was real embarrassed because I had on t-shirt, jeans, and didn't have no lotion on my feet. But in that moment, all I could think about is, oh my God, I have to make a deposit, it's homecoming, had all this going on, right? And so I had a young lady that came to me afterwards and said, you will forever be our queen. And that hit me, but what really got me was I checked my email afterwards, and there was an email from a young man that was in my class when we were doing this particular project. And he told, hey, Ms. Pitts, I'm so happy for you, you deserve this. And my favorite moment of high school was this project. And it's not because of the content, which in my mind I'm thinking, why give me a backhanded compliment then? But he said it's because they knew I was suffering in silence all year. They knew that me and the admin had, our challenges. Some of them some kind of way knew about some health challenges that I had. And he told me that the fact that I trusted them to make a decision that would not only impact them but me meant the world to him, especially in a day and age where a young black man from the South is not necessarily looked, proud upon. And so I cried, like I'm finna cry now, and that email is worth everything to me because they put me last and knew I was gonna cry. The work we do as educators is invaluable. And I tell the students on the first day and the last day, every voice deserves to be heard, every light needs to shine, but not bright enough to the point to where we don't know who light it is that's shining and bright lighting up the room. And so that moment just made me realize I am doing my part. If I get never get another award, if I walk out this classroom today, I know I did my job because I taught my students to take care of their fellow neighbor and also, when time allows, to make good trouble. Thank you.
Brilliant. So, colleagues, thank you for sharing these stories where I think you all heard both the challenges and also the joys, the successes that come from this work. And I'm guessing that every educator in this room has a similar kind of story to tell. I want to make a little space now for to take some of the questions that are coming in on Slido. So if you'd like to add your question to the list, please feel free to do that. And panelists, I'm going to turn and grab us a question here to put out. So there's a question. Here's an interesting question. What's something that you think this room, full of civics education professionals, should or could better understand about classroom practice for that? I'm going to read it one more time and give you a little think time here. So what's something that you think this room full of civics education professionals should or could better understand about classroom practice? Ellie, please.
Modeling. We are the biggest example for them of what civic leadership participation looks like. And in my classroom, I try to really honor everyone's perspective and opinion as the teacher. When I know that a student might be saying something that's slightly unpopular, I don't own that. I will embrace that perspective as a very valid point. And also, that's just one thing. And then the other thing I would say is I do spend several days community building. I did put aside, I try to incorporate like the values lesson, but it's really about getting to know each other and placing such importance on building relationships between each other, because when there's fear, they're not vulnerable, they're not willing to take risks, they're not willing to be themselves. My students are there in the back right now. And so I spend a lot of time trying to break down those barriers and those walls and help them understand that we're all people and we're all in this together, and hopefully they'll take those lessons on into the future.
Great, thank you. Is there another thought?
Well, one thing that I think that kind of follows that same path, but just that it takes time to give students the opportunity to practice and realize that new teachers don't necessarily understand that kids don't come in ready to have these conversations. And we provide sentence stems, we provide opportunity where it's very scripted, but that takes a lot of time, and it fits in with the community building. But that just to realize that is a skill that we have to practice. Just like we're writing an essay, you practice how do we write. You go through in AP, there's a formula. In this way, there needs to be a formula where we are practicing this skill. And I used to tell my students, the 2 words you can't say in debate is your mama. Growing up, that's what it was. You have to learn how do we have these discussions, and you have to practice it regularly.
Yeah, I can add on a little bit about the administrator perspective. So our team really listened to what our teachers were struggling with around moving conversation in the classroom from being kind of this surface level or really divisive conversation, and how do we make that shift into actual discourse. And one of the things that we decided to do collectively was to work on these skills in every classroom, right? Not just in the civics classroom, but take ownership over a student's ability to build on each other and then to justify their own position, and then from there synthesize with their peers in conversation. So we've really tried to model, like Ellie said, some really important strategies that are cross-curricular to provide students with sentence stems that they can use in any discipline, and then work to remove those scaffolds, right? To give the students the opportunity to take the risks and to do it themselves, because they can.
Want to add, Veronica?
My mind just went to the educator and teacher wellness. If you are at the beginning of your career, take your time, observe other educators in practice, but please don't allow yourself to get lost in doing what that veteran teacher who's been doing this for 15, 20 years has been doing.
I appreciate so much the insights that you have all shared. And one thing I'm clocking as I'm listening to these stories is that there was no magic bullet in any of these stories, right? There was no curriculum that made it right. There was no single policy that made it all right. It really was just day-to-day decisions, sometimes on an hourly basis, to build relationship, to listen, to amplify voice, students' voice, teachers' voices, community voices. Those were the steps that kind of moved you through these challenges. And again, you all have similar challenges, and I'll bet you all have similar ideas, similar stories to share about what helped you get through those challenges, and I hope you will share those stories. That's why we get together in places like this, so that we can hear and learn from one another, knowing that every context is different and no solution is going to work perfectly everywhere. But this is what gives us the energy for that ongoing work of helping support students, and the ongoing joy of seeing them learn skills and values and knowledge that they will use every day for the rest of their lives. Please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing these stories.